Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey, and welcome back to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you for coming along on the journey of this new show that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor of being the co-host for this show, along with Craig Brown, an industry leader and former PLM leader at GM. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Tom. Today you find me in Ames, Iowa. We'll explain that in a little bit.
You know, it's always kind of fun because you're always in some place that's way different from where I am in Texas. So we seem to have, we kind of have a where's Waldo? It's where's Craig on this show. So each week we try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all of the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is no different. It's going to be awesome. We have Jim Zwica and John Heller, both from Vertex Software. So John is the product marketing manager and Jim is the director of manufacturing solutions. And they're going to both talk independently and together about sort of the journey of Vertex, how they started, where it came, and then the industry challenges that it can help everybody who's listening. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Can you give us a little bit of your backstory? What did you do before Vertex?
Yeah, it's great to be here today, by the way, guys. Thanks for hosting us. My name is Jim Zwica. As you said, I'm part of Vertex now. Vertex is a startup, but the core group of Vertex is not new to what we're doing here. I'm an Iowa State mechanical engineering grad. If you know where Iowa State University is, that may provide part of the clue why Craig is in Ames, Iowa. When I graduated in the 90s, I was lucky to be part of a company called Engineering Animation Incorporated. Back then, there was really no such thing as a virtual design review. And EAI, through some benefits of our alumni, one of them being the founder and president of Silicon Graphics Computers, he gave the Iowa State Mechanical Engineering Department a lot of computers, and of which we ended up using at EAI to create what I would argue is one of the first frameworks for a virtual design review process. So I, as an undergrad, and our founder, Dan Murray, also as an undergrad, we found our way over to the Iowa State Research Park and ultimately contributed to what became the tool called VizMockup, now embedded into the Teamcenter suite of solutions. And then we also put the initial frameworks into the JT file. So the company contributed what I would argue pretty heavily in the initial design review process, or virtual design review process. I myself went out and implemented these solutions around the world. Ford of Europe, Volvo, Fiat, Renault, all over really the world. Most recently, I was working at Caterpillar. And when you're implementing, you understand the pain firsthand. And once our tools that we built that reached their 20th birthday still remained to be the same tools, and I knew there was still a lot of core pain in the process and the tools, and there's almost an acceptance of pain in collaborating, it caused me to come up and talk to Dan Murray, who actually wrote all of those tools I mentioned. And we started having a conversation about what do we do about the future. We know the current solutions are not going to work. We're squeezing the very last bits of information or usability out of those tools. And we needed to build an entirely new platform for the future. And so thus Vertex was born. And we've brought a bunch of people together to help realize that. Some of them actually from back in the day when we were doing this, but also a whole bunch of new tech people as well to help us bring this to fruition.
Yeah. Now, Jim, you reached out to me a couple years ago at one of the, back then we called it PLM World. And you said, I want to talk to you about visualization and collaboration. And we had a really good discussion. And I remember thinking, okay, that's one I got to keep my eye on. Of course, back then you weren't yet public, or you hadn't announced to the world what you were doing.
Right.
And then last year, as things were changing at General Motors, you reached out to me again and said, well, now it's time. It's time to talk. And as many of you and the listeners know, I retired. And you still reached out to me in February, which pleased me to no end. and then you said, it's time. And it described to me what's happened since February in terms of why now? Why have you guys come out now?
Well, first of all, I was very glad that you wanted to work with us on this and have been able to provide some of your expertise. Well, just coming with the idea that we need to make it better, that doesn't happen overnight. We were stealth for nearly 4 years, working very heavily on just feasibility. Will this even work? Is it going to work as we want it to work? And will it actually address the pain that is prevalent across the design review process, not just intra-engineering, but across the entire enterprise? Once we felt confident that we had something that would work, we then started to bring in technical leadership, people that we knew. Whether you like it or not, Craig, I don't think you can leave the passion of this. If you have it now, you still have it. I would love to think that I could step away, but I think I would always be very, very passionate about this space. And the whole point is that you want to create things in a more efficient way, in a better way. And that's been our core idea with this. So the why now is it took us really 4 years to get our platform in a position where we said, you know what, this is really going to work. It's really going to provide value. And we're excited to show it to the rest of the world.
So like a lot of companies, when they get to this stage after the initial invention, then they have to become more formal at how they organize their business and so on. And John, that's where you come in. So could you describe your journey to Vertex, and then what's the problem Vertex is solving, this collaboration problem?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Good to be here with Craig and Jim. So yeah, prior to joining Vertex, I spent 18 years in the industry, the manufacturing industry, and actually spent most of that as a customer of a lot of these problems that are faced, with the information exchange out of product development, out of PLM spheres, and worked in many different functionalities, including project management, working through product development projects, had some time in supply chain and procurement, as well as in marketing right now. And really throughout those 18 years, there was always a struggle in collaborating on 3D information, 3D models. And it never really dawned on me that there could be something better until I came across Vertex. And as soon as I better understood what Vertex was doing, I about fell out of my chair, because a lot of the issues and the problems that Vertex is solving were issues that I lived through, not really knowing that there was anything better, not knowing that there was any way to advance the state of the art in collaboration. And so, kind of understanding from an industry standpoint, everyone is on the go. They expect their technology to be keeping up with them. They want the info when they need it, how they need it, and accessible at their fingertips. I also experienced many situations where I needed a collaboration network that could flex to include as many people as I needed. There were times where I needed to bring in a larger data set. And certainly this collaboration needed to be synced and supported with minimal footprint. It needs to be agile. And there was always the struggle to find an agile way to digitally collaborate in there. And so despite these challenges out there and the advancements within the PLM industry from a technology standpoint, there are still limits when it comes to collaborating within the 3D world, within PLM systems. And really Vertex is aimed at expanding the value of the PLM world when it comes to collaborating on these 3D models and in the digital information that needs to be passed from various functional areas and across the supply chain. What we commonly see, despite advancements in these technologies, again, is people continue to wait when they want to access heavy 3D model and data sets. There continues to be struggles when it comes to sharing those 3D models in an effective way. A lot of times there's heavy user interfaces that require massive amounts of what I call hunting and pecking to find the right information. And then this user scalability, being able to bring in the necessary individuals to view the model, to have this sort of truly aligned visual platform to be able to collaborate as you need to. And then, all of this has to be supported still even today by very expensive hardware. Oftentimes graphical processing units, there's heavy support staff behind it. So again, despite advancements in technology, we still see these limits when it comes to effectively collaborating on 3D information.
But yeah, so I think another thing that's happening that, computers where they were 20 years ago, files and a CAD file associated with a person and then the security on the file because it was easy to do, might just be all wrong, right? And in large companies where we try and reuse assemblies and parts, this notion of ownership on a file actually gets in the way. What the intellectual property is the assembly of parts that make up a system or a complete product. And so this notion of collaborating based on a scenario or based on a context and then managing the evolution of the context to decision making, to me, it's one of the most powerful things you're making real, as opposed to the other approach, which is to say, oh, well, just put it on the associated design file and off we go. Any things you want to add to that point?
I like what you're saying there. And one of the things that we assessed early on was the fact that you have to send the file in the first place was a pain. How about a right to view? And if you can view it in an easy way that's traceable, that what everyone's looking at, because what are you trying to do? If it's just a decision, an engineering change, or a work instruction, or that sort of thing, do you really need to send a packet of information to them, to their device, and then that device has to figure out how to interpret it and view it? If you can just show it and everyone's working with it without device dependency, without size dependency, and it's in a controlled, traceable way, then we feel like that is the way to go. You made me laugh when you talk about 20-year-old technology. We used to FTP packets of information to the Apollo moon mission, right? Yeah. I think that's where that came from.
Yeah, maybe not.
Luckily, I wasn't around.
They collaborated back then. It was all on one, at least mechanical design. It was on one drafting board or a room full of drafting boards, right? People looked over each other's shoulders.
Yeah,
there wasn't any notion of file transfer.
No.
Right?
But I think that was where it was kind of an aha moment for us, was that it's a right to view and not necessarily having to send something, and then thus fragmenting and orphaning, and then, oh, you were looking at that one, this is the one we should be looking at.
Yeah, and the view is the assembly or the context,
yes,
not the parts. And this is, I think, going to be part of the evolution. It's part of what people that still do my old job and IT architects are going to have to struggle with, is in order to get the next speed enhancement, decision-making speed more than anything, not necessarily authoring speed, is all about how do you share these contexts quickly in a secure way. I kind of like the idea of this scenario being short-lived, meaning we're going to make the decision this week. And once we make the decision, it'll go back into the design and off we go. We'll keep a record of the decision, but it's not necessarily any part revision that the decision was made on. It's rather the context of the load cases and the usage profiles coming from end customers, right? It's really interesting. And, you're right, Jim, earlier you said I haven't lost the passion yet. I suppose that's why I'm a podcast host for Digital Enterprise Society. And frankly, I'm interested in finding a few folks like you that are pushing the envelope, as the aerospace guy would say. It really is interesting this particular week to look back 50 years and look at how the Apollo program operated, how they collaborated, how they achieved so much in a span of about 7.5 years. Of course, they had unlimited budgets, which that kind of helped. Yeah. And they had the fear of the other evil empire taking over. But in any case, whatever their motivations were, they did something pretty amazing. And a lot of us that are in this computer-aided world, you got to realize the computers came into reality then. The ability to make it a small computer, to put it into a spacecraft, to use it to help land it on the moon and get it back here. And anybody who's interested in the history of computing and making things smaller so they then become affordable, and then whole Moore's Law and everything else that came after that, really should study the space program. It is pretty amazing what happened. Anyways, so for closing thoughts, Jim, when do you think this will take off? When do you think people will realize there is a better way to do engineering?
We hope soon. There's interesting drivers out there. We don't have the drivers that you mentioned with respect to the space emissions and all that. But there are drivers that may give us the same result. And it could be the next generation coming in by chance. They seem to get a lot of attention with respect to wanting them happy so that they do good work. Pure competitive spirit, actually, too. If you think about cloud, not cloud storage, but cloud computing, which is still in its infancy, and we're lucky enough to kind of get exposure to that sooner rather than later. And what it affords as far as not just computational power, but security, traceability, all that. I think that as we demonstrate and we provide utility to that platform that shows that you can do things much faster, much better than you could before, then that inertia will start, and then we'll get critical mass, and we'll get people understanding what we're trying to do and embracing that level of collaboration. I do remember back when I was at Ford and we rolled out the first digital prototyping process there, no engineer wanted their stuff to be shown because it wasn't ready. But then you go, okay, that's fine, but would you like to see everyone else's stuff? And they say, absolutely, I need to see it right away. And when we rolled out those things at Ford, the noise went away immediately. As soon as we rolled that out and they saw the value and they saw everyone's stuff immediately, and it was just a day old.
Isn't that amazing? This notion that it's not ready. Yeah. If you worked in the car companies or the aerospace companies in the 60s and 70s, that wasn't even a choice.
Right.
You had somebody looking over your shoulder all the time.
Yes.
Right. And so this notion, again, I'm picking on file architectures, right? This notion that I'm going to keep it, I'm going to check it out, I'm going to make it private until I get done with it, and then I'll check it back in. It actually slows companies down.
Yeah.
And it is an interesting phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a result of PCs and everything else getting so cheap. I mean, that's part of what drove it. There's other things that drove it, and now we got to kind of go back the other way. We got to improve the collaboration context.
Yeah,
I really enjoy working with you guys. I look forward to a bit more of that. And Thom, do you have any other questions? Are you hoping to start using this stuff? You in fact could use this without training, I'm sure.
Well, Craig, I'm not the technical guy, but the one question I always like to bring all these conversations back to is, what does this mean for the person listening to this podcast, right? So a lot of the people who are listening to this, they're tuned in because they want to know about their careers and what can they do. And Craig brought up something really interesting. And he said the younger generation probably is the ones who have to drive the change. Based on what we've talked about and what you do and what you've seen in this world, what should the person who's looking at, how do I grow my career? What does this mean for me? What advice do you have for people?
Yeah, so I can take a shot at that. Absolutely, I think continue to challenge the status quo. There's a lot of interesting things happening when it comes to collaboration, and so true what Craig and Jim spoke to a little bit earlier about this whole, I am afraid to share my thoughts and ideas out. I want to hold everything tight to the chest because I'm afraid of what somebody might say. Well, it's really putting yourself in a spot where you put an idea out there and you invite collaboration into it. And so I would say, starting out, really seek to challenge the status quo and to seek to put your ideas out and seek input, seek collaboration, and really try to keep, again, it's about advancing the state of the art and really creating those efficiencies to get at decisions quicker that move businesses forward.
I agree on that. I mean, I'll give a little shout out to Iowa State. I mean, one thing that they prepared you for was that you're very likely going to have to reinvent yourself 5 or so times throughout your career, and I'm at least on track for that, I would think. So just be ready. I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. And then the other thing that Iowa State really reinforced was we don't care what tool you use. You just need to be focused on what the outcome is supposed to be. And so if you find yourself being too biased towards using a tool and you're not paying attention to what am I supposed to deliver, then you're off. And you need to actually reassess that, because you shouldn't be married to a tool. You should be married to what needs to be delivered. And then even a third one is something called a theory of constraints. You should always know your supplier's supplier. You should know functionally really what your supplier doing, and also what your customer needs. And if you have working understanding of what's coming in and what's going out, then it allows you to question, are we doing this the right way?
See, Tom, it came up again.
Yeah.
Theory of constraints.
Yeah.
This is really something people need to go read. It's really important.
It doesn't get the fanfare that it should, because
That was a couple of episodes, and Craig got really excited, like it was.
Yeah.
I forget the book, but there is a good book on that. But it's a really sound process, and if you can't answer those questions, then you need to go do some work.
Well, Jim and John, thank you so much for being guests here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. We appreciate it, and thank you for joining us. And I'll tell you what, everyone who's listening, join us next week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. Hey, Craig, any last words?
Well, just one. Remember, it's about connecting without boundaries and creating without limits. And I look forward to our future podcast. Thank you all for listening.
The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check it out at digitalenterprisesociety.org. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more